Pokémon is known for being an extremely well-balanced video game, with the main quest consistently presenting an appropriate level of challenge for players of any caliber. The sole exception to this rule is Pokémon Generation 2 and its remakes, in which the developers decided just this once to make the games too easy by messing with the level curve. Obviously, being someone that knows better, today I've decided to rectify Game Freak's greatest and only mistake by fixing the worst Pokémon games, Pokémon Heart Gold and Soul Silver. In particular, I will be fixing Johto's gym leaders, as they famously lack in Generation 2 Pokémon, despite being the ones who should represent Johto first and foremost on the world stage. The problem is immediately apparent with Falkner. As you can see, not only does he exclusively have Gen 1 Pokémon on his team, he also only has the Pidgey line. Fixing Falkner is simple. You'll replace his Pidgeotto with a Noctowl, but as you've probably already guessed, Noctowl, being a Johto Pokémon, is terrible, so we'll need to give it some buffs rather than simply slotting it in here. I didn't want to make any big stat changes to Noctowl, so instead, my solution is a brand new, custom ability just for the Owl Pokémon, Pidgeotify. Upon switching in, this Pokémon immediately transforms into Pidgeotto. In order to further up the challenge factor, we'll also be granting Pidgeotto the Intimidate ability, because it's an extremely intimidating Pokémon. Overall, this fight is now significantly more balanced, and should make for a much more exciting opening to the game. On the subject of balance, the next gym leader, Bugsy, is anything but. Between his powerful Scyther and his unevolved Metapod and Kakuna, the scales swing wildly throughout the fight. As such, we'll be buffing Bugsy quite a bit to make him consistently difficult. First, let's rip off the band-aid with what will likely be a controversial change. Bugsy's Scyther may be popular, but as I stated earlier, I know better, and I think Scyther is green and ugly. Bugsy's new ace is Ledian. Moving on to more pressing matters, let's address the two elephants in the cocoons in the room. Metapod is weak, yes, but it's also incredibly iconic. He's well known for starring in that one episode of the Pokemon anime, and also in the hit Disney Plus series, The Acolyte. Therefore, I cannot in good conscience evolve Metapod. To compensate, we will be promoting Kakuna into Beedrill. However, clearly Beedrill is not strong enough to make up for Metapod alone. This means that I will have to make some changes to Beedrill under the hood. Here is my fixed Beedrill. It is now a bug fighting type with a much higher base stat total. Now, before you yell at me in the comments, I understand that flavor-wise, Beedrill does not look like a fighting type. As a compromise, I decided that it was necessary to modernize Beedrill's design alongside its statistics. As you can see, the drills have been removed to make room for powerful fists, which allow it to use all of the elemental punches upon evolution. Given the startling nature of his newfound fisticuffs, I also found it appropriate to give Beedrill the Intimidate ability. With these changes, it's my firm belief that Bugsy will now be a far more interesting fight, especially with the powerful Ledian on his side. When it comes to interesting fights though, few in the entire series are as interesting as Whitney. In fact, I'd argue that Whitney's gym battle is one of the most intricately designed in the entire series. However, Whitney still has some serious issues, not with her Pokemon, but with herself. Upon defeat in a gym battle, Whitney not only cries, but also petulantly refuses to give the player a gym badge. This low testosterone, beta male behavior is unbecoming of a gym leader and, frankly, embarrassing. The fix here is simple. In my version of the game, Whitney is now a normal fighting type with increased base stats. With her new power, she won't cry upon defeat. In fact, her newfound confidence allows her to mog the player out of the gym entirely with her new Intimidate ability, putting the onus on the player to hit the weights and come back with their own gains. It is my firm belief that this is the best course of action for everyone, and will allow both the player and Whitney herself to look inward and better themselves and their bodies. Another person who needs to look inward is Morty, the ghost-type gym leader. I'll be frank, Morty is a problem. He's old-fashioned and too worried about tradition. In an attempt to look forward to the future rather than dwelling on the past, as is often a theme in JRPGs such as Xenoblade, Morty has been removed from the game entirely. I instead elected to replace him with my OC, Derek, a true modern Renaissance man. He uses stall and OU, wears Supreme, and buys out pallets of Pokemon cards at Sam's Club to resell at twice the price. I think this change is an important step towards modernizing Pokemon Heart Gold in a way that will meaningfully speak to a present-day audience. Chuck is fine. Jasmine, the 6th Johto Gym Leader, is probably the most egregious example of this game's poor design. By some happenstance of catastrophic developer oversight, Jasmine uses the Pokemon Steel Licks, regardless of whether or not you're playing Pokemon Heart Gold or Pokemon Soul Silver. This is obviously a huge problem, because Steel Licks himself is silver in color. This causes ludonarrative dissonance for anyone playing Heart Gold version, completely ruining the game as a result. To fix this, I've replaced Jasmine's Steel Licks with popular Steel-type Pokemon Goldango. Goldango is well known for being gold. To further remedy this obvious developer mistake, I've elected to fix the game's box art as well, given that Ho-Oh is famously orange rather than gold. But you know who else isn't orange? Price, the Ice-type Gym Leader. In classic Johto Gym Leader fashion, he is severely lacking in native Pokemon. However, unlike other Gym Leaders, I believe this is actually one of Price's strengths. He is extremely old, and thus he caught all of his Pokemon before Heart Gold and Soul Silver were ever released, meaning he only had access to Pokemon Red and Blue on Nintendo Game Boy. This masterclass in gameplay story integration just goes to show that even at their worst, in a game like Heart Gold and Soul Silver, Game Freak are still the best in the game development business. However, the presence of Piloswine is a blemish on an otherwise perfect team. As such, the only change I'll be making here is entirely removing Piloswine from the team and replacing it with a female Dugong. This female Dugong is the original male Dugong's girlfriend. On the topic of girlfriends, Claire is attractive and the size of an average human mother.